The path of an artist is full of challenges, which has pushed me to reach out to other professionals about their experiences. Join us as we explore the journeys of fine artists who have turned their passion of creating art into a profession. From their highs to their hurdles, these are real insights, breakthroughs, and triumphs to inspire other creators to reach higher. Welcome to the Business of Art podcast. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Business of Art podcast today. We are thrilled and excited to have with us today Kwani Povi Winder, who is a professional artist since 2013, right, Quannie?
Yep.
Yeah. So glad to have you. Thanks so much for your time. We're gonna jump in here. I'm gonna read off some of her bio, and then we're gonna hear some of her journey. So, Kwani Povi Winder graduated with a BFA in oil painting from Brigham Young University, Idaho, in 2013, and she has been painting professionally ever since. She is a member of the Santa Clara Pueblo tribe, and in her work, she seeks to preserve, share, and educate about her unique heritage through her paintings. She incorporates spiritual undertones in her work in an effort to deepen her understanding of Mother Earth and her relationship with her creator. Her paintings are characterized by vibrant colors and impressionistic brushstrokes. She focuses on landscapes and native figures primarily in her work. She is married. She has 2 daughters, and she describes herself as a stay-at-home artist, creating with her daughters by her side. She loves the outdoors. She's frequently painting outside in plein air and taking advantage of every opportunity to paint and learn from nature. So, that's it, but definitely not it, right?
Yeah.
We want to hear your journey, Quannie. Again, thanks so much, and feel free from early on till now. We want to hear what it's been like for you.
Oh man. So I guess my journey kind of started. I come from a long line of potters from Santa Clara Pueblo. And with that, my mom was very artistic and she was a school teacher. And so she encouraged me to create and provided many opportunities growing up to create. And then I think my first formal art class wasn't until high school. And we had this incredible high school art teacher that Mr. Coles. And he has turned out so many professional artists in different photography and all these other things. And he just was incredible. He was teaching at a college level in high school. And
wow.
We were very fortunate to have him. It wasn't until college that I realized how good he was, because I went to college and I was like, oh, I already know this stuff. And watching my classmates struggle with things that I had been exposed to as a freshman in high school.
Wow.
That's incredible. At college. So yeah, it was really, really fortuitous for me on my art journey. But even with all of that background, I remember being very adamant that art wasn't a career and that that's what other people did. They were special people, somebody from Southeast Idaho, farming rural community would never, become a professional artist. That just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't in the cards. So I went into college I loved biology and I loved science. And so I went to pursue a biology degree and wanted to be a physical therapist. And I remember sitting in freshman orientation and they rattled off some statistic of how many times people change their major. And I remember thinking very proudly, I know what I'm going to do. I'm never going to change my major. And just said right then. And so that's how I did. And I got really close to graduating with my biology degree. I only have a couple classes left actually for the biology portion of my degree at BYU Idaho. And kind of what made the difference is, I guess there's 2 parts to it. Even with my biology degree, I had a friend who was an art major. And she got me to take classes with her, art classes at BYU Idaho, because everybody wants to take art classes. You have to be a declared art major to take an art class. That's not just like general art for anything above that. And for some reason, even though I was a declared biology major, I did not have that hold on my account, and I could register for drawing one, for photography one, for ceramics class. So I just like kept taking art classes along the way because that was like my fun class, and it was something I identified with of like, oh yeah, I'm good at art and I like this thing. And so I just kept taking classes even though I was a biology major because I could. The other part of that is probably about 2 years before I graduated, my dad passed away unexpectedly, and I was very close to him, and art is kind of what got me through that a little bit. I remember being in a very, very dark place and just like wanting something to pull me out. And so I painted like a lily and a sign that said like live, laugh, love, like the iconic, like at the time decor thing.
Yeah.
It was the first time that I had like created a piece that wasn't for an assignment. It was hard. It was really weird to say that. I mean, I did that all growing up, but like once I started having classes and stuff, I didn't really create outside of my classes. It wasn't a thing. And it brought me such peace that it changed me. It was like, man, if this is where you're going for peace, you probably need to be there full time. Like that's your solace. And so that's when I started to explore switching my major. I tried to do a double major, but BYU Idaho just wants you in and out as quick as you can. So they wouldn't let me. Credit wise, I was 1 credit over like what I needed to be. But if I switched my major, suddenly they gave me 20 extra credits to like do stuff with. Nice. So I was like, well, man, I'll just switch my major. So switched my major, and then I continued taking biology classes because I loved it. And my science teachers, I was in the upper levels by that point, like the 400 and 500 level biology classes. And they were like, come on, we love you. Like, you're enjoying this. We want you here, even if you're not a major.
Right.
And so I stayed on. I was the TA for the anatomy lab, like for all the pre-med classes, like the 400 level classes. That was fun. Especially when they found out I was an art major, you could see them kind of be like, you can't be an art major and teaching me. And I'd school them, and it was really funny. But that was like the funnest thing. Like, I loved my biology classes. I still love it. And I really miss biology. I'm a spiritual person, and there was very much so the thought that there's other people who could pursue the physical therapy path that I was on, and that I had been given something, a gift and a talent, and that I needed to further develop that talent because not everybody had it. And it was something special for me, given to me to share and to lift others with. So that's kind of what started it. And then from there, I applied for the BFA program. I got my BFA, I graduated. My path was not to be a figurative artist. I wanted to be a plein air artist because I loved hiking and camping and nature and the earth. And that just seemed like a good fit. I like traveling. Like that was also a good fit. So for the first couple of years out of college, that's what I did is I traveled and did plein air competitions kind of locally here in the West.
Okay.
And then slowly I started doing, I always loved figurative work, but I had this idea in my head from some of my professors that figurative work is really hard to sell. Like people are much more likely to put a landscape up on their wall than a picture of a person. And so just financially, I was like, okay, I'm going to go where the money is.
Right.
Because it's already hard enough to start off as an artist. But then I did a couple figurative works that were native figures, and they sold really fast. And I was like, maybe I should do more. Maybe there is money in this. So I just let, like, a little bit at a time, just kept going and going until I realized that it was a way for me to kind of explore my Native identity. I didn't grow up on the reservation. We would spend time there every summer with my grandmother. So I was very familiar with my cousins and participating in some of the cultural things. But
Yeah.
it was a way for me to ask questions that I don't think I would have ever asked had I not been an artist who was trying to learn about their heritage and start to share that.
That's really neat. So where did marriage come into this whole picture?
It came in right before I switched my major.
Okay. Okay.
So my husband, we got married and in the fall, and then my dad passed away in the spring. And we'd only been married, I think, 6 months-ish about.
Wow.
And then I changed my major the next fall. So my poor husband did not marry an artist. And he never, I don't remember him ever questioning or just like anything at all. It was just like, okay, that's what we're doing. That's what you're doing. Like, he just accepted it and just really has been my champion. Like, I couldn't do what I do without him. He's an accountant, which is great for my taxes. But other than that, like, he was very supportive for that. And then as far as our daughters, oh man, losing my dad threw me for a loop, and I was not emotionally ready to take on more responsibility. So we didn't have kids, I think, until we were married 6 or 7 years. It was a while. And in our culture, that's a huge amount of time. Most people my age had kids almost immediately within the year after getting married. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting that there's a neat parallel. Like I was at BYU, Idaho. I was a little bit before you, obviously. But I was thinking of being a dentist. And so I was doing all the pre-med classes and things like that. And then had a professor kind of kick me in the butt and tell me I was wasting my talent, wanting to work in somebody's mouth versus making beautiful paintings. Yeah. And anyway, it was a hard thing to kind of come to, because that kind of stigma of starving artist was kind of, pounded into my brain. Not that I don't think anybody ever said you can't be an artist, but it just felt like that was just the reality.
Right? It just feels like there's all these people that just, and nobody really ever came and said that other than, a couple professors of things, but even then it wasn't very strong. It wasn't, I feel that deeply.
Yeah. And anyway, I just think that's interesting how that all worked out. I actually was able to double major.
Oh, really?
But I had always been an art major. And I ended up double majoring into education. I was about to graduate with my BFA in illustration, and I realized I wasn't going to make any money anytime soon to provide for a family, because I was married and had a kid by that point, and so I was like, I got to have something that's going to make money, and so I double majored into education and got my teaching degree as well, and then took the education route. And anyway, but just, it's interesting. That just sounds so familiar, and I really resonate with your story, and so sorry about your dad. I lost my dad in 2009 as well. Too young, and just hard. And that it's things like that. We just got back from a family reunion. A family funeral on my wife's side of the family. And it's those experiences that we have that I really feel ground us, and it helps us to see the things that are really the most important that we should be focusing on. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you, when your dad passed.
Yeah, it was. It's funny because grief does this weird thing. it erases a lot of your memory of that time. And so
Yeah.
I remember a few things, but living through a fog and trying to figure that out. But for the longest time, I think I'd been ignoring this art side of myself and realizing just how important it was to me. And that's when it kind of came to the surface. And that's when it was like my aha moment in that of just, oh, okay, this is a bigger role. This means more to me than I thought it did. And so
Yeah.
I think having that grounding at the beginning of my art career has made a huge difference when things have gotten harder or opportunities lost or missed out on things. It's kind of helped sustain me through that too. So it's kind of been helpful throughout the whole thing of having that experience, as bad as it was at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's powerful. I think being an artist, it's like we sign up for the reality of living a little bit closer to the emotional surface than I think most people do.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you're constantly looking for beauty and, I don't know, whenever you're outside and you see anything, I don't know how you think, but for me, it's like, oh, how would I paint that? I'm always thinking, how would I paint that?
Yeah.
But I think with that mindset of, okay, what's the beauty here? How can I find beauty in this, whatever this angle, this perspective, this little, view I've got out this window, whatever it is. As artists, we're constantly looking for the beauty that we could then reproduce somehow, or try to suggest in a painting or create. And I think there's a price that comes with that. Yeah, I think, and my wife, she thinks I'm too sensitive sometimes. But it's just kind of how we are as artists, we see things differently, and I think it's a gift, but it's also a curse in some ways. It can
It
be
really is.
challenging.
On the flip side of that, well, to continue with your thought, you
Yeah.
talk about beauty, but I always thought it was interesting metaphorically. We're always trying to capture light. Like lighting is what makes a painting. And that's what makes like the contrast and the light and the dark.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of, I tell people, I was like, 90% of what I do is looking for what I did wrong. And it's very humbling because
Right.
like you get to lay down paint, but also you have to recognize what's good and keep that and don't touch it and mess it up. But it's
Right.
always like, what do I need to fix? What do I need to do? And so I see that paralleling in other parts of my life of like, oh yeah, I can recognize this really beautiful thing, but that I can also see this and this and this and this and this need fixing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And it, like, I think that's where the curse is that transfers into many other aspects of our lives. And it's a challenge for sure. So you've talked a little bit about, your daughters, and your husband's at work. I'm assuming most like 9 to 5
yeah, he
typical
works a
job.
regular job.
Yeah. And so you're a stay-at-home artist. And I think I would love to dive into this subject here. I think
Yeah.
that there's so many women out there who have this dilemma of raising a family and trying to be a professional artist. I don't know what that answer is, but I think you have some great insight. So we want to hear it. How do you make that work?
So I was terrified to have kids, quite honestly. Again, there was this idea and this feeling that, and I did have professors tell me that having kids was a death sentence to your art career. Like it was just, oh, you're
Man.
having kids. Okay, we'll see you in a couple decades once they're grown and you get back to it. And at the time that I entered the art scene, there were not many young mother artists to have an example of. Like, I really, like, the only ones I was aware of were only a couple years ahead of me in graduating. And they were still trying to figure it out too.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling like mourning my art career because I felt very strongly that we needed to have a child. And just like, okay, I'm going to have this child and I will no longer be an artist. And I remember like just dying a little bit inside.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, there was no alternative at the time that I had seen, or it just, yeah, I don't know. But I did it. And then I had my first daughter, and I found baby wearing. It wasn't a huge thing. It's become more commonplace now. But that was how I got to paint. As like, I remember I had a Christmas commission. I had my daughter in October. I had a Christmas commission. And it was just a small little, like 8x10 or 11x14. And I had her next to me in like a little bouncer. And that's how I painted. I had my easel and my baby like right there. And I would just pop between the two and take care of her. And then when she was a little bit older, I started wearing her in like a ring sling and put her on my back, and she would take naps while I painted. I have quite a few different photos of, it sounds funny now, but I wanted to capture this just because it was like something I'd never seen before. But I took pictures of myself with me painting at an easel with her on my back, holding a paintbrush or like wielding around. That's when I met you, Mark, is right at the beginning of that motherhood journey with my daughter. Cause, we were in a show, the Out West show.
Yeah. And,
I think she was 1 or maybe just under, not quite 1 yet or something.
Yeah. She was really little for sure.
Yeah. And it was just kind of interesting. It just became like, well, it's not either or. It's like, she just comes with me. She's just with me everywhere. And she learned how to behave, like how to respect art and be in art spaces, where people are very scared to take children because it's like, oh, don't touch. But she was just there, and she just grew up with that. And then I found out like later, my mom said that she grew up, they would go to pottery shows and she would like take naps underneath the table that they had their pottery out on and stuff. So like my grandparents had kind of just, you just take your family because that's a part of who you are. And it was important for me. It became important for me to show my daughter that, look, I have this interest that you might follow or you might not, but this is important to me. And we're going to go and do this thing because it's important to me. But baby wearing was a huge part of that. That was how I got her, took her with me. You talk about plein air painting. I would take her and have her on my back in a backpack, and I'd be plein air painting. Or there were times we go camping and I'd have my her camp chair next to my camp chair, and I'd be sitting and painting. And so it was just after when she was a toddler, I just remember realizing like, wow, like she's never gotten into my paint, only one time. Like, and it's just because it was around, it wasn't unique or interesting to her. It was just like, that's what mom touches and does stuff with.
Right.
And she had her own art supplies and she could do stuff with. So we very much so, I just incorporated her into my art career. And then we had a second child and she did not like to be worn. Something else I just remembered when my daughter was like starting to crawl. I was painting in a bedroom and it became immediately too small when she could crawl. And so I moved down into my family room and I set up my easel in the corner and I put up baby gates on the stairs. And so she had like baby proofed the whole thing. And I remember just like throwing toys out on the floor and be like, "Okay, I'm gonna go paint." And she would crawl up to me when she like needed something, and then she'd just crawl away. And like I had, like one ear kind of listening for her, but it was just very much so like she did her thing, I did my thing. And I jokingly told people, they're like, "How do you create with a child?" And I was like, "I ignore her." But not really. But yeah, you kind of do. Like, and I think that's
Yeah.
part of a good childhood. I was ignored, and then I got to do creative things because I wasn't always with my parents. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And now they very much so, both my daughters identify as artists, and they love creating. Like just today, my daughter was like, "Mom, what did you draw when you were growing up?" And I was like, "Well, dragons and horses." And she's like, "Can you teach me how to draw a dragon?" And I was like, "I don't remember the last time I drew a dragon." But yeah, it's been really fun to kind of foster that in them and just let them have at it and create. My youngest, my 4-year-old now, when she was 2, I remember sitting at the table working on something. She grabbed a paper, grabbed her crayons, and set up and did a painting. And I just remember stopping what I was doing and just watching her for half an hour. And she was just sitting there meticulously coloring this thing that she was creating. And it just blew my mind that she
Wow.
could do that at that age. And she has always been very careful with her colors and the shapes that she draws. And it'll be very interesting to see what she moves into and if she continues having art be a part of her life.
Yeah. Yeah. What a neat way to grow up. I can't even imagine, from my family, my dad was into carpentry a little bit, and then he kind of ran his own business, a different kind of business. And the only artist or art that I was really ever around was, my older siblings would sometimes doodle or draw. And I just would always try to mimic what they were doing. Just because I was the youngest and I wanted to be like
Mm-hmm.
them. And it's just interesting that I wonder how things would have been different had I had more influence in the art.
Yeah.
And but then again, like, would I have loved it? I don't know. That's one of those things like, well, we'll never know. But I think that's really fascinating to hear about your daughters growing up with that just being part of life every day.
Yeah.
So can you give us some of the details as far as like what a day typically looks like? Because I know that, like, obviously, there's other things, but like, what is it like nitty gritty? What does the day look like for you?
The day to day, our life is a little chaos. So I'm thinking back, like when I actually had like a system going on, because we just moved into a new house and still trying to, my studio's not completely set up yet. And
Yeah.
it's just a little crazy right now.
Yeah.
So our day to day right now is very different from what it used to be, but it would get up most of the time. We also homeschool. I just added an extra like layer to my like, oh, we're home. We want to travel. Let's just, I want to just keep doing this. So I added some extra punishment to my having kids around, but
We
it's worked out.
homeschool too. We just
Yeah.
started last year, so I get it.
Yeah, it's just like, but it's so good for our family and it works so well with me being an artist and traveling and stuff. It just, anyways, it's a good fit for us, but it's also an extra challenge and then layer. But so
Yeah.
typically we get up late. Like 8, 9 is when we like start like moving. I'm usually up earlier, but not out of bed. I'm like answering emails or looking at things and like, so yeah, we get up, we usually eat, and then usually I go to painting if that's like if there's something that I have to do. And then they kind of have free reign to just, we have an art desk that has like paper and pens and watercolors and all sorts of anything. And so they usually hit that first and then they go, we have a lot of, we had like a small room building area that had like Legos and like tiny figures and stuff like that, and a table set out so they could create that way. And so they'll usually do art first. They'll go to that, and they kind of just do their own thing. Then we kind of meet up for lunch, and then we go on, and I just continue to paint, and we just kind of check in. I play referee a lot with them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they, not now that they're a little bit older, but when they were younger, wherever I was, they were. So if I was in the kitchen working on something at the table, they were in the kitchen. We had to get them their own table because they kept trying to be where I was. So we had like a kid's table in our kitchen. And then if I was in the living room painting in my little easel, they were there playing in the living room. And if I went upstairs to do something in what used to be my art office, they would just kind of follow. You know, it would take a little bit. They'd lag behind me, but usually they just ended up in the same space, which is why right now they're at the grandparents' house, because if not, they would just be, you know, here. And and I love them in my space, but there's definitely, that's kind of what a typical day would look like. When I'm getting ready for a show, you know that it's like all hands on deck, and you work harder and longer hours getting paintings prepped and framed and ready and all of that. And when that happens, my husband becomes a single parent, and he takes care of meals, and he works from home too. Ever since COVID kind of happened, he's been home full time. So we're actually both working out of the home.
Oh, that's so nice.
It is really nice, because if I need to run somewhere or do something, like I no longer had to take them with me everywhere. Most of the time I did end up taking them with me, but it wasn't it made it a little bit easier. You can get in and out of a store a lot quicker without having kids.
Yeah.
But
yes.
but yeah, he takes over. He takes over when I'm prepping for a show, especially about the 2 weeks before things need to be delivered or headed out. He'll usually do meals and just kind of watch them. And then especially once he's off work completely, he'll usually take them somewhere, so then I can have like undivided attention time. So it very much so I wouldn't be able to create if it wasn't for my husband. And then when we're at shows, he makes sure that I get food, because I don't know about you, but I forget to eat when I'm talking to people. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he'll bring me food and just like, here you go, Quannie. And he'll make sure he'll take them around and kind of just take over that mental load that usually I'm responsible for. He will take that on at different times. So there's very much so like I like to tell people it's like a pendulum, like it swings to like, sometimes art is more important than taking care of kids. And sometimes there's days where I don't create because my kids need me. And so it's a lot different. I think I'm in a position where I'm not the main provider for our family. But I am the main caretaker. And so there's differences there, I think, between like what you would experience as an artist versus me with a family and kids at home. But it is. And the thing that's been very interesting that I've learned because since I've kind of hit the art market about 10 years ago, there was a whole bunch of us artists, women artists, that like decided we wanted to do art and do it full time and have young families. And so it's been interesting to see everybody's dynamic, because it's different. There's not one path for everybody that works. Some people, they hire a babysitter and they have 4 to 5 hours and that's it. And they don't do any other creating besides that little block of time. Others, they choose to stay up later. So they are with their kids during the day, and then they have a few hours at night and in the morning that they spend their time creating. And then other ones are like me, where they're just trying to find that dynamic of like push and pull, and it's just a mess and it's all together and it's grouped together. But that's been really neat to see, is that not everybody's path needs to be the same or at the same level. For some reason, I thought that being a professional artist was like, here, and you needed to be here all the time. But really, there's steps leading up to that, and you can dabble and still be there. I've had to be very patient with myself this past year because we've been building a house, and I did a lot of the stain work and the woodwork in it. And so and we painted our entire house. And I did. And I had help, but it was a full-time job for me. So I would get up at 8 and I wouldn't get home until 5 or 6 at night. And sometimes I would stay there until 10 at our house working, trying to get it ready and, finish the things that I was responsible for. And so obviously I've taken a step back a little bit from creating, but now that we're in our house, I've got to catch up. And so it's been kind of nice to have more time and more reason and, talk about seasons. It's coming more full circle now. Like this little painting here is one that I was able to do last week. And so it's been, or a week or two ago, it was really fun to just kind of sit down, and I gave myself a deadline of like, you have 5 hours to do this thing. And so it was just really fun to just kind of have that again and give myself permission to work on things like that again.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that and going into detail. It's so interesting how unique each of our journeys are and the way that things work. And I think that if people get nothing else from this podcast, I think it's the fact that there are so many ways to make it work as an artist. There are so many right paths to take to make it. And I think there's just a few key elements that have to kind of be there. And one of those is actually time spent creating. Yeah. But, and that's probably the biggest one. The biggest factor is that you just make time for it. But whatever else those other nuances look like, it can be very, very different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's incredible what you've been able to do and accomplish as a mother, and especially homeschooling. And that's phenomenal. It sounds like your husband is quite the partner to be teamed up with. Yeah. That's incredible. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for not signing up for this live, he sure has gone all in. Yeah.
Well, I think he's got a pretty good deal here, I think. So talking about your work, that I can just see a little bit of that painting behind you. That one that you just mentioned that you created. It looks beautiful from here. Let's talk about your painting process. You said you used to do mostly plein air landscapes, have moved figurative. What is your typical process with your work?
There's kind of two ways that I approach paintings. Some of them, and I guess this pertains to my figurative work. Sometimes I need a very specific composition and need elements to be planned out. So like this painting over here, I actually grid it out. Is that what you like? Yeah. I put grid lines on my reference photo and then put grid lines. And then I hand draw my pieces. I know that there's other ways, but I like being involved in the drawing process. I know some people trace or like project, and there's different ways, but for me, it gives it a life and it helps me kind of shape where I'm going. But a grid is a way, you talk about working smarter. I felt guilty for a long time that I used a grid, but I want to work smarter, not harder. And I wasn't using it as a crutch. I was using it as a way to get my measurements quicker. And, if I had to, I could figure it out and spend the time, but I don't want to spend my time measuring. I want to spend my time painting and working on other things. So it was a way to get there sooner. Yeah. So often I will work up I'll do the photo shoot, and from there I'll pick about 10 images that just kind of immediately stand out to me. Sometimes when I do a photo shoot, I have a clear idea of what I'm trying to go for, and other times it's like I just want to take a picture of this person, and I kind of know what poses and lighting work. And so we just kind of go through that. And then whatever sticks out to me after the fact is what I kind of develop.
Yeah.
And often paintings have been ruminating in here for years because it's just a matter of time of trying to, okay, this painting now has time to be developed and worked on. So I take it into Photoshop. I just recently got an iPad Pro, probably about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. That streamlined my process a lot more because it's allowed me to sketch and explore backgrounds without being super committed.
Nice.
And then as I've added more like 2D design work that are native symbols into my work, that has allowed me to explore that end of things a lot easier than I was just doing it on paper and pencil before, and that took forever. And then if I wanted to go back, there was no like undo. It just
Right.
have to redo.
Or mask that layer, or
yeah,
get rid
like,
of the
oh,
layer,
let's take it away
new
and
layer.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, like layers have made a world of difference for as I've entered into the modern art world. I know this stuff has been around since I was in college, but it was so. I take my photo reference, I grid it out, and I work from a photo. I cannot look at a computer screen. It doesn't work for me. I've tried it. I've tried using an iPad, and I'll print it out as like an 8x10, 11x14 or something. And that's what works for me. I think because I'm like 90% sure I have ADHD, I think the physicalness of a photo helps things settle more in my brain. And
wow. Okay.
makes it more real for me. So yeah, I work from a photo, and then I'll get it drawn out, and then I'll usually do an underpainting. But not always. Sometimes I just get right into the paint, and then I paint very similar from what I've seen your process is where you kind of start and then you work out from a point. I do hit like dark areas first, and then kind of develop. But I try and go for true color right away. Like I know some people just kind of block in an area and then they modify colors. I like color, and so I just try and get it. Like I almost go excessively colored and then tone it back, rather than go middle ground and push it more. But I like working kind of try to get it all out and then refine some stuff a little bit. But I try and nail it as much as I can to begin with.
Yeah.
The other way I work, like with this one, is I just have an image and a feeling that I want to convey, and I have a canvas and I just go for it. And so I just start sketching, do a little wash. Having kids, I have cut out mineral spirits, or I use Gamsol, but I only use it occasionally for an underpainting. And even then I've started using water solubles, and I'll use that for the underpainting. And then I don't use it at all to clean my brushes. I just wipe. Sometimes I'll use baby wipes, but Murphy's oil soap has been my go-to for cleaning my brushes after that, because I wanted to cut out toxins. I'm also sensitive to smell, but yeah, trying to cut out toxins. The paints I use also have been modified. I don't use any cadmiums because of the toxicity stuff too. So
can I ask you, what are you using as a substitute for those? Because I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about for sure.
Yeah. So I use, let's see, instead of Cad Red, I use Rembrandt's red medium, permanent red medium.
Okay.
Alban Veselka was the one that introduced me to that pigment, and I really like it. I don't use a ton of reds all the time unless I'm working like really bright red, and that works really well because it's a warm orange red like Cad Red. Yeah. For yellow, I use Jack Richardson's Hansa yellow. It acts just like Cad yellow. So because I paint very colorful, I got really picky of like, I started out with a limited palette, and I still have a pretty limited palette. I just use primary colors for the most part.
Yeah.
But I wanted saturation. I wanted to be able to control, and there were some of those colors like yellow ochre that I couldn't get enough punch from. And so I cut them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically, I'm trying to think. I use ultramarine blue, ivory black, titanium white, or variations on titanium white. Usually it's kind of mixed with something else. I still haven't settled on a white.
Yeah.
And then the majority of my colors, like I don't use alizarin crimson. I use red matter deep.
Okay.
I look and pyroline. I'm not sure how you say that. I looked at, because permanent alizarins are usually made with synthetic colors, and I looked at the mixes that they use to make alizarin, and then I just went for like the source. And so I picked out 2 of those, and I have those. So I have a warm red and a cool red on my palette. And then I have a warm yellow, which is the Hansa yellow from Jack Richardson. And then I have a cool yellow, which is transparent yellow oxide from Rembrandt. And I use the oxides a lot. I use transparent oxide brown, transparent oxide yellow, and transparent oxide orange, which kind of holds the place of like Indian red a little bit.
Okay.
So, yeah, I use a lot of transparents.
Yeah. 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 When you're going for rich color, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. That's valuable information. I have a separate studio space, and so I go as toxic as I can. Not really, but I'm not as worried about it. And so, but I like that. That's really good information. Do you typically work on like a linen panel? What is your surface?
Yeah, I like slick surfaces. So I will either do a gessoed board that has been sanded, so it's pretty smooth. And then I use, can't remember the brand name, but it's a sandable gesso. And it's slick enough, because other gessos like suck in your paint, and that drives me crazy. And so this one doesn't. If you do a lot of layers, it stays on top and it doesn't just like absorb it all in.
Yeah.
I use linen.
I use Liquitex is my gesso, my go-to gesso, the Liquitex Professional, and it doesn't suck the juice out of my paint. So that's what I use.
Yeah.
So
I should try that. I'm not settled in my gesso. Oil primed linen, glued down to a board is my go-to. That is what I like, not having a bouncy surface. And it's funny because when I started college, I could not tell you the difference between oil prime linen and canvas. Like it didn't register the difference. And now I'm like, ew, canvas. Like just because it does, it just sucks it up. And usually it's got a really heavy texture. Whereas the linen, you can get a little bit more finer tooth on it and stuff. So that's my go-to. I get boards from a cabinet maker, so they're super cheap because like they usually have cutoffs, and so that's the majority of what I use is like an MDF panel board that I glue down my linen onto. So I just have a roll of linen in that, or I'll just take the board and I seal them with shellac to just try and get them more archival. It's got like a hard surface on the back, but it's like MDF panel and so they're heavy, but like I don't have to worry about being punctured unless you're like checking your painting, which is going to damage any painting. They're pretty heavy.
Right. Yeah. Don't throw your paintings unless you hate them. So
I have done that before.
I've broken some paintings in half over the knee,
I haven't done that yet. I should try it.
Yeah, it's really therapeutic. You should give it a shot. Sometimes they just don't work out. So you talked about your process. As a professional artist, how are you marketing your work? How do you get your work in front of people that buy it? What do you do?
A lot of how I've built my clientele is actually doing shows, like where I take and set up a booth of some kind, and then people come for a weekend and I sell paintings. I've tried out a whole bunch of different shows. I've kind of settled on to just about 2 or 3 that I do in a year, and my biggest one being in Santa Fe in August.
Okay.
But even that, with COVID, that kind of went away a little bit too. It was kind of nice not to have to haul everything.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of it is through Instagram, just sharing my stuff on Instagram. But I would say most of my clientele has come through that or comes through my gallery. I am very fortunate to be in an incredible gallery that is very patient with me and very accommodating for what I need.
That's
Like this
awesome.
past year, I kind of like prepped him. I'm like, I'm not going to have a lot of paintings this year. And he's like, you know what? I don't want to even see a painting unless you feel like it's a good painting. He's like, take your time. It's fine. So that
Oh, that's
I know
awesome.
doesn't happen very often because sometimes they're like, well, we need this many paintings. And that just wouldn't work for me in my dynamic. But King Gallery they have a presence in Scottsdale and Santa Fe. And for the past couple of years, that's actually been my biggest revenue. It surpassed even my own income from me doing shows on my own, even though they take a commission. So
Wow. That's awesome. That's
yeah,
great.
it's been really great. So I've been very fortunate. But yeah, marketing, that's the biggest thing. And then just showing up. There comes a point, I remember people telling me this, and I don't know if this is true in your career, Mark, but other artists who were advising me told me it takes about 3 to 5 years. And then like you get established and people start looking for you and they start recognizing your name. And that held true for me. It was probably about my 5th or 7th year when opportunities started coming to me. And it was at a point when I felt like I could start to be picky. Because before that, it was just like anything, any crumb, anything I could get was like
Yeah.
I would chase it. But then as I've become more established and more well known and more sought after, I've been able to be like, no, I don't have to do that thing. I don't have to run myself ragged chasing down every single opportunity.
Yeah.
And that was probably the best advice I actually received was from my uncle. He shared it with me my first year of ever doing a show in Santa Fe. And he's like, you're going places. And he's like, let me tell you, don't forget where you're at and don't forget what's important because you're going to start getting opportunities and you're going to want to say yes to all of them. And he's like, I caution you, don't add too much too quickly and be careful in your growth and don't ever forget your family. He's like, because I've seen it time and time again where artists will get famous and they end up getting divorced or they end up losing sight of what kind of started them and what was important and what made them famous. And he's like, I caution you. And so I've tried to remain that and have that in mind, that add a little bit at a time and not. And there's years where I have run, it's been unbalanced and it's been a bad imbalance. And we're like, whoa, okay, let's not do that again. Let's not do that much. Let's reevaluate here.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's important is that, I try something and then I always try and give it time to work too. So if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to do a show, I want to be able to make sure that I can try and give it at least 2 years or 3 years of doing something and showing up, because I've just learned that that's what the first year you're new, the second year people start to look for you, and the third year is usually like, okay, you're here and stuff. And so I've kind of continued on with things or dropped off things as that has kind of been my process of working through things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that perspective. I remember it was 2015 and I was still teaching high school and I had all these opportunities that just started coming my way. And it was like, I'm saying yes to everything. and I just got I got spread way too thin.
Yeah.
And the next year, conversing with my wife, we decided to simplify pretty significantly. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up making more doing less.
Yeah.
And life, and I think it came down to two different things. One, I wasn't spread so thin. And two, I was able to really hit hard on those things that I was doing that needed to be in my life. And so I was able
Mm-hmm.
to just do those well. And so I think less is more in so many cases,
Yeah.
because you're able to give it a lot more energy and to really just hit a home run with those two or three things or whatever that number is. You're able to give it the energy and the effort that it requires to do a good job with those few things.
Yeah, when you can have the time to really nail it and I think that's why I appreciate my gallery, because he's like, hey, come, I'm doing a show with him in this August, because I was like, hey, we're moving in. I've got time. I still have this year kind of clear that I haven't been doing as much, and I'm ready to come back. And he's like, yeah, let's just nail it. Let's just show him, like you're back and you're back with more. And it's not that I haven't been busy. It's just, I've just been taking a step back and just giving a little bit of pause, because I think it's been good for me to have that little bit of perspective and also make me hungry for it again. I think COVID did a number on me mentally, and art is such a mental thing that it was very difficult for me to create and even do portraiture work. There was a time I took a year off from portraiture work because it was too much. I could not, it was too emotional and I didn't have that to give. And so I went back to painting landscapes, and that kind of healed me a little bit. And then
Wow.
now I'm back at it, and better in a better position mentally to handle. It's such a mental game too. You're creating with your soul, and you're pouring like
Yeah.
yourself and being very vulnerable. And it's tough and it's rough to like give something. And if you don't have that emotional well to give from, then it just takes from other areas in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really neat, important perspective to hold on to and maintain. One of the other artists I interviewed, she was saying how important it is that we have that in our lives, that we have beauty and we're involved in things that recharge our batteries and keep us excited about living, because it that's what we're using. That's the store where we create from. And
Mm-hmm.
and if that's empty, yeah, it's a massive imbalance. And I think, yeah, the cost comes from other places at that point.
Yeah.
um, not where they should be coming from. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the perspective here. I think that this is, I don't know, it maybe it sounds too fluffy and out there to a lot of people, but to me, it's just like, unless you're really creating all the time, it's hard to know that. It's hard to understand the cost and the price that really is,
Mm-hmm.
to be making and creating, especially things that hopefully are beautiful and that have energy that are giving to other people. When I look at beautiful paintings, I feel like they have this life in them,
Mm-hmm.
and they give, like, it's like they breathe this positive energy, and I don't know
Yeah,
how else to say it.
it
But
is.
yeah, I really feel that. So I had this question earlier as you were talking. When you are preparing for a painting, like you have an idea in mind with a figurative piece, and you do a photo shoot, what does that look like? Like the nitty gritty, how do you set up a photo shoot? And like, I've had this question because I've thought like it'd be fun to get into figurative stuff,
Mm-hmm.
as a wildlife guy. But it's like, that's been one of the things that's held me back so much, is like, oh man, then I've got to do photo shoots, and I got to come up with costumes, and I've got to like all this stuff. And like, so tell us about it. I want to hear some of these nitty gritty details.
Well, this hails back to my college years. So once I switched to art, I went all in art. I was like, I am going to take as many classes as I can in as many subjects as I can in art, because I want to learn. And so I took ceramics and sculpture. And I took so many photography classes, and I'm so grateful that I did, because I took a portrait photography class and learned about lighting on faces and lighting.
Oh.
And that has made a bigger difference in my reference taking and knowing how to set it up, and how to even, like, when you're doing a multi-figurative piece, you can't always get your models all together at the same time, and learning about eye level and focal length and range of, like, if you're zooming in, how do you make that work when you can't zoom in as much, and how do you recreate like the same perspective across these different photos? So the nitty gritty is I most of my photos, because I was cheap and I didn't have lights for a long time, I would just do stuff outside. And because I had taken that photo class, I knew how to recreate from light. A lot of times I'll hold my fist up in the air, and you can see the lighting on your fist. It's like a little ball almost. And you can see really good lighting actually right here of like your light source, your highlight, which meaning your light's coming from this way. So then you can like modify it of how you want, if you want more in the light or you want to turn it and have more in the dark. That's something that I do, is I'll hold my fist up. Like,
I like it.
And then your fist. I'm just like, they're like, what is she doing? She's trying to be a model. Navigating models has been a hard part for me, I would say. I end up painting family a lot because it is easier. There's a different level to, in my work, painting Native Americans. There's a different, I want to be respectful to them and their culture. And I made mistakes, and I've learned from my mistakes in working with people. And so the way that I approach it now is very different than how I started off, I guess is the way to say that. And it's turned into, most of the time, I'm just painting family because they understand what they're getting into. And I always compensate my models. I didn't always do that starting off, but now it's very important to me that I'm making money from this. This is my job. I should be paying the people that are making this possible for me. And then starting with a photo shoot, I usually plan about an hour and a half. And if I'm hiring a model who is not a close friend, because usually it ends up just being like a family reunion and you're chatting and you're talking and it's really fun and relaxed. But if it's more professional than that, I usually come in with a list of poses that I want to, or sketches of things that I want to try and recreate. I often will go Googling for images of trying to see, how did somebody else compose this, or how did somebody else work out this problem, and then kind of take maybe how they approached it and flip it in my own way. I've ended up using myself as a model a lot recently because I'm cheap and easy.
Right. The cost is great.
I'm available, cheap and easy. But I can't obviously take my own reference photos. So it's been partnering up with other artists or other photographers to like be like, hey, there's this image I want to take. Can you help me recreate this? And so very much involved in the direction of it. But I'm not the one clicking, because I have done that before, though. I've set up a remote and a camera and like been hitting things. And it's more time effective for me not to be the one that's taking photos. But I try and do, if it's a model, like a one-off model, and I won't ever have access to them again, I will try and do like a 180. So I usually do their face and have it lit in a certain way. And then I will take photos, profile, and just like, and just around from side to side. Usually I go a little bit further back behind so I can catch that kind of like not complete profile, but a little bit less than a profile. And I will do that at different levels. So I will do it eye level. I'll do it where I'm looking up at them a little bit more. And then sometimes I'll do it down, not as often, because most of the time you're like, I try to keep my perspective eye level or a little bit lower. But
Okay.
I'll do that, and I'll do that several times. I am not they I've just learned that you just take it all, so then you have it all.
Yeah.
There's other artists that are trying to be more conservative and get the exact photo, and I just try and get it, because there's times where I have gone back and been like, oh, I don't like this pose, but I like the face, and I can take that face and stick it on a different pose and work them together.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was just trying to get the one photo, I wouldn't have the other. So I've got a big bank of references of multiple shapes and images. And then usually I like to have them just kind of like, often I have my models wearing blankets. So I'm like, okay, just move the blanket around. So what's nice about trying to get reference photos is I don't have to worry about getting a really nice photo like a photographer does. I
Right.
can have crap in the background. I can have other stuff. So I just tell them to move. And so, they just do these subtle movements as they move through, like go down and pick something off the ground. And so I can have movement in my photo, and I can have even things a little bit blurry and still be able to work with that
Yeah.
to get a reference from. But the most important thing is getting my lighting and making sure that my lighting is where I need it to be for the photos. So if that would be my hugest clue for people who want to be a professional artist or want to start, taking, because I know others rely on photographers and and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. For me, I've just chosen that I want to be the one that's like involved from the very beginning until the very end.
Yeah.
And so having the photography background that I did has really aided in that and has allowed me to do that. It's also allowed me to I do my own captures, and I have from the very beginning, and that has saved me, I'm sure, thousands over the many years that I've been doing this, over 10 years. So
When you say captures, I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
like you're painting, because you need an image to share of your painting. You can't just, you can take a cell phone photo, but
Oh,
people
I
need
see what you
images
mean.
for catalogs and high
Yeah.
resolution photos for
Yep.
different things. And so I learned how to use, in my photography class, my teacher was very generous in sharing that information with me, because it's a little proprietary, it feels like. But
Right. Right.
he showed me how to use polarizing gels that go over the lights. So the light hitting your painting is like directionalized, and then doing cross polarization, where you have also polarizing filter on your camera lens. So then it crosses it. And then so it's very like, it takes care of the glare. You get truer colors. And then also having the photography end of it, of being able to make color corrections and being able to match it so it's a more faithful representation of your painting and stuff. That has made a huge difference in my art career. And like I said, saved me thousands of dollars and allowed me to be a procrastinator, which is probably not the best thing, but I can paint up until a deadline. And then as long as the painting's dry, I can take a capture and like the next day take it to a show. Versus if I had to have somebody else do my captures, they need minimum 2 weeks. Usually
Right.
it's longer than that. And
Yeah.
so I just can't function that way. So it allows me to like create. I create, again, this goes back to my ADHD that I'm discovering. I need a sense of urgency in my creation. And that affords me to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so helpful. I don't do all the technical aspects of photographing my work. I figured something that really works well for me. And I'm really happy with it, but it sounds like there's a lot more that I could be doing that I probably should be to get my captures. But outsourcing that, it adds a whole nother level and aspect to getting ready for shows and things. If you want to have really great, captures of your work, records and high quality images that you could use to either print, or whatever, you've got to figure that out. And that just adds a whole nother whole nother avenue. That's not the word I'm
Yeah,
looking
moving
for.
part.
Yeah, a whole other dimension to being an artist. And so, yeah, I do it myself too, but I'm not as technical as you are.
Well, and I think like there's the work smarter and not harder. Like it's something that I felt like I had the experience and the knowledge, and
Yeah,
it's easy and quick for me. It would take more effort and more time for me to outsource it than it is for me to handle it on my own. And
yeah,
so I choose to handle it on my own. That's not to say that down the road I won't outsource that or train an apprentice that can do that for me.
right, right. No, and I think that's valid though, because there's opportunity cost in all the things we take on. And some things are it's cost effective and it makes sense. For me, like we've had a lot of renovations on our home that we've been doing, and when I was building my studio, I hired out help to do a lot of the work because I'm worth so much more painting than I
Yeah,
am at the $30 to $50 an hour that I'm paying somebody else to be working on my home
that's
and
exactly
doing it more effectively than I would be.
right.
And so those are things to take into account whenever you're deciding whether or not to add something into your life. What's the
Mhm.
cost? Oh
The
man,
opportunity cost there.
opportunity cost. Thank you.
You're right. I started out. I made my own frames, and I still do on occasion if I'm in a time crunch or I have a weird size and I can't get to a framer.
Yeah,
But that was something that, like, okay, it was a hurdle, a financial hurdle. Framing is so much.
yeah,
um, and as a new artist, my prices were not driving the cost of the framing, the type of framing that I wanted to use. And so that was a way that I could work around it. And so I actually wrote a grant and was awarded money to purchase a chop saw and set up a system to where I could create my own frames from home rather than going to. But I also had a woodworker that taught me how to do this. And my BFA project, I made my own frames for, and that kind of is what started that. And since then, you talk about I'm worth more painting. Now it doesn't make sense for me, time wise and other things. But at that time, I had an excess of time, and so I was able to do that. But it's not something I choose to do anymore. I choose to let somebody else handle that, and
yeah,
because I'm in a position where it makes more sense for me to spend that time painting.
yeah,
It pays for it, I guess, is the way to say that.
yeah. Absolutely. I think that's something about running an art business that is so important to always be aware of.
Yeah.
What to outsource, what makes sense to outsource, and like whether it's photographing your work, whether it's making your frames. I'm definitely not a framer, so I'm grateful for wonderful people who know what they're doing with all
Right.
of that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Um, so yeah, I want to ask, being Native American, you have
Mhm.
an incredible heritage, and I think every time I'm around Native Americans, I want to know the stories. I want to hear, but to me, I guess how do you feel? And you've talked a little bit about it already with some of the heritage that you've got with pottery and that. But I would love to hear, how has that influenced what you're doing? How does that play out in your work personally? I want to hear more.
Um, I think it's not something that I can separate from my work. And it's been very healing in a lot of ways. I Even though I grew up knowing my culture and being involved with family, and I know my village, and I know now I'm enrolled. I wasn't always enrolled in my tribe, but it's been a way for me to explore my identity and connect with that side of me. Growing up in Southeast Idaho and my tribe being in New Mexico, um, it's always been a part of me. I had the opportunity to speak at BYU Idaho and at a art seminar. And I remember one of the art seminars, the artist showed us their progression from like early on throughout their whole life, like how their arc progressed. And I had a mom that saved my art, so I went digging. And
That's awesome.
even as a young child, I found pieces where I was like trying to tie my nativeness into assignments and other things. And I don't remember doing that. Like, I don't remember that
Wow.
being a thing I was thinking about, but it was something that must have just been there my whole life. And because there was a painting, like a pastel painting of my grandfather, and we had to do a surrealism assignment. And I had like used native symbols and like a native house and all these other things that it's funny because it's just, I don't know. But then I've always struggled with identifying and not feeling native enough because I am mixed. My mom was from the reservation. My dad's an Idaho farm boy, and not feeling like I belonged in either, really.
Yeah.
And then I like my friend who uses the term ambiguously brown because I've been yelled at by these little Spanish grandmothers, and like we went to China, and like the indigenous people in China, we kind of look like too. And so my mother was mistaken for some of the indigenous people over there. And so
Wow.
this ambiguously brown and like trying to find my place, and art has definitely been a way that I'm trying to explore that. That's also why I paint myself a lot, because it took about 5 times of me painting myself before I actually created a painting that felt like how I feel about myself. And that was weird. I had to like mentally separate myself of like, I'm just painting another person. I'm not painting myself. Because the first
Yeah.
few, there was like it doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like me. And I was like,
Right.
okay, it's fine. It doesn't matter. It looks like a person. Now it's less deep when I do paint myself. But there's this sense that you're unique. I sit in a very niche spot as an artist because the native painters who do paint, not many of them paint in a representational style. And
Yeah.
even fewer of them are Pueblo Native Americans. And so there's just not very many of us. I remember an artist reaching out to me. He's Navajo, and he paints in plein air. And he was so excited to find another native who's painting in plein air because he's like, we don't exist. And he was just so happy. And watching
Wow.
him like just take off. I feel like there's people that are, the Western art world in particular has a special place and a special feeling for natives painting native, whatever that looks like, whether it's landscape or their own culture or and I feel like there's something to be said in any culture of someone from that culture will approach it very differently than someone not of that culture when they're depicting these different themes. And so when I started, I'm ashamed to admit, but when I started as an artist, I had a very Western view of how to approach native figurative work. Of like, well, legally, I can use this reference and this thing and this, but then the dynamic of like, morally should I be, or am I asking this person, do I know them? How, like I'm using their face. I feel like they should have a say in how they're portrayed and how they're, and so I started changing. And like I said, I made mistakes and I've learned. And that's why things are a little bit different. And part of me taking a break from portraiture work was like trying to figure out, it was during COVID, those 2 years that I just was like in this turmoil, this personal turmoil. And I just had to figure out how I was going to, so I just kind of eased back into it. And I feel like I'm in a much better headspace. I have a much clearer idea of how I want to go forward and what I want to say. And I'm not sure what that is yet, but I know I guess I more so know what I don't want to do. And so
Yeah.
I'm still trying to find my way with that.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the mistakes? And you don't have to go into detail, but I think just for other people, it's valuable sometimes to know what not to do. And I don't know, can you give us some of
Yeah.
those points?
Like, so when someone's in a public space, they have no right to personal privacy. So, like people in a crowd, it's not, they can't say, oh, you can't use that photo, it's of me. You were in a public space.
I see.
So there's a lot of people that will go to powwows, which are a public space, and take pictures of natives and paint those pictures of natives. I'm not saying, there are beautiful, inspiring pieces that I've seen that have been painted that way and approached that way. And that's kind of how I started. And since then, being a native, I've heard feedback from those people being painted. I don't want to be painted. And just learning that, these are people, not just a culture.
Yeah.
Like humanizing them, I guess, is the way, like, and realizing like, oh, just like I don't share my children on social media, they don't want themselves shared on social media just because they're dressed in a traditional manner. Like, so as I've learned from that, I've made really close friendships and other things with people of other nations. But it was, I made some missteps of painting people that I didn't have their permission to paint, or I didn't know their name or things like that. And since then I've decided that that's not how I'm going to approach it. I'm not saying that like legally I wasn't doing anything wrong, but morally it felt wrong to me. And so definitely native painting native has this whole other element because it's a small world and people know each other and people know other things. And so trying to approach it in a different manner. And like I said, I'm still trying to figure that out. I don't know exactly. That's why I dial it back and I paint family. And that's why I said family kind of knows what they're getting into. They've seen my work. They share my work. They're okay with that, but not everybody else is okay with that. And I've learned to be okay with that and just respect that.
Yeah. So, as somebody who's not native, who wants to paint natives, I've never really been in that realm personally up to this point, but I know I know a lot of other artists that are and do. What kind of things would you recommend to just be careful of and aware of as they're approaching that?
Get to know them. Getting permission is the biggest thing. Is don't just take a photo and run with it. And then respect their answer because maybe they're not. And then some are okay with different levels of sharing too, of like, yeah, you can paint this. Just don't use it on your promotional material. Don't advertise me kind of thing, but you can share my image and you can, the things that are associated with using that as a painting. And some are like, you can paint the painting, don't share a picture of the painting. And so finding out, like just asking questions, because I don't think they realize that as a native person that they have options and that they can have a say in like how they're portrayed. The biggest thing is compensation. Many of these people are living in very less than, how do you say that? Like they're coming from situations that are very different from the typical American, and they face a lot more challenges, and financial compensation for something is huge. And some don't want to be paid for it because of different reasons. And so also respecting that. And also Native Americans are often viewed as like a monolith of like one big category. And the reality is it's like trying to say Europe is all one thing.
One
And
nationality in
really,
Europe.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have all these different nations that have different beliefs and different things that they're comfortable with and things that they're not comfortable with. And I don't know that I barely know my own culture. I don't know any other tribes really at all. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm learning, but we don't all think the same, and we don't all, like, just for example, there's people that are offended by Native American, the term Native American. I personally am not. I choose to use the term Native, but
Okay.
I'm also not offended by Indian. And I know people that are deeply hurt by that reference. So just learning vocabulary and what people are comfortable with, and then just asking and having conversations, because most of everybody just wants to be respected and understood and heard. And I think if someone's approaching it that way and they're using people that want to have their image painted, if they're using models that are being compensated fairly, then that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Kind of stepping it outside of the art world, but still in the art world. Like, a lot of natives do pottery and jewelry or do fashion or clothing. And I've had people be like, can I buy that? I'm not native. Can I buy that? And I'm like, yes, please. Just make sure you're going to the source and that you're not stepping away from where that's coming from. So, like, if you're buying a native designed piece, buy it from the native, not from a company in China. Buy it from the source. If you're buying turquoise jewelry, buy it from someone who handmade it versus buying something that's a knockoff that was kind of a stolen design or whatever. Don't steal your images. Get them from the source.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. And I think a really wonderful perspective that it's easy to get. I don't know, when you're an artist, and like from my perspective, I'm trying to make a living to support my family, and it's like I'm just trying to save as much money as possible. But if you're not careful, you can burn bridges or step on people's toes or do things that really aren't conducive to fostering good relationships with people, and making sure that everybody is treated fairly and with respect. So I appreciate that. I want to end with if you could go back 10 years ago, whenever when you're just kind of getting started as a newbie and maybe thinking of somebody else who might be in your position, trying to get going, what one or two things that you might do differently, or advice that you would give to yourself?
Don't get niched down. I tried so long to just maintain like landscapes. The reason why it took me a while to get into figurative work is because I had this idea that, okay, if I'm going to be a landscape painter, that's all I can paint. And I can't try new things, and I can't, I need to get established in this one area. And the thing that I found is that as I've painted other things like vegetables and succulents and, things that I find beautiful, people respond to me as a painter based on the things that there's something for everything, I guess is the way to say that. Okay. Yes, I am known for my native figurative work and my landscapes, but for the longest time, I held off on painting other things because I felt like I couldn't. And I found such joy in them when I allowed myself to do that. And I sold many of those pieces and have made many friendships and new collectors who collect just those things that are not my typical things. Yeah. And so
I have a succulent and an onion that you painted. Yeah. So
I love that onion, by the way.
I still love it. Still love it.
It was a good one. It was that one, that onion, and there's a pair I painted that I'm like, I'm glad they went to people I know because I love them deeply. But just allowing yourself, those are my fun pieces, and that's kind of what keeps it fun and interesting for me. And so don't be afraid to follow what you like, because honestly, you'll probably find an avenue in that thing to monetize, because this is about professional artists. If I was talking to anybody else, I would say you don't have to monetize it to be an artist, but in this specific sphere of trying to succeed as an artist and in your career, don't get bogged down just painting the one thing. Don't be hopping everywhere and painting everything all the time. Like, stick with something for a while, but don't be afraid to do these other things while you're focusing on that one area.
Nice.
And then the other thing that I would say is network. I have gotten more opportunities from people that know me or friendships I've gained. Point blank, the gallery that I'm in is because a collector was like, hey, I think you would be a good fit for this gallery. And they sent my information to the gallery owner, and the gallery owner reached out to me. I didn't even have to apply to them. Like, it was awesome. They this collector had been with them for a long time. They trusted him. They knew good art. And because he knew me and he had been watching me for many years, he's like, she would be a good fit for your gallery. And we have been. And so I'm grateful for that. But that's networking. Or some of the shows that I'm involved in, I've been invited to because I know artists that are in charge of it or involved with it. And so that's a huge thing. For a long time, I tried to keep myself apart. And, really it's the friendships that make a huge difference in my art career.
That's awesome. Quannie, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for giving us your time and for sharing your journey and some deeply personal things. I think that's wonderful and so valuable for all of us to hear. So that's it for the podcast today, guys. I'm going to have links to Quannie's work down in the show notes. So if you want to go check out all that she's got going on, take a look. And Quannie, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Really appreciate it. Happy painting, everybody. We'll see ya. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Art podcast. If you're interested in resources and education to help you successfully create art and then sell it, please check out the Business of Art course in the link below. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.